I'm not here to tell you he's a good guy. That's not what I'm telling you.
Welcome to Nice Ashes. Join hosts Mike and Nate for cigars and culture. Let's go beyond the smoke.
What are we smoking today, Nate?
We are smoking us a Punch Knuckle Buster, and this is the shade variety. We've smoked a couple of these before. We've smoked one that never made it out to the airwaves due to some technical difficulties, which may be remedied in the future. I'm not sure.
It's a possibility.
It reminds me of a nub, and I was at the tobacco store, Tobacco Grove, earlier today, and got a special cigar for a special episode coming up. And got us a little other cigar that is brand new cigar. Not that we're a breaking news cigar podcast, but I saw that there was another company that had two cigars kind of the same size as the nubs.
Oh,
I can't remember what it was called now for the life of me. So my story kind of sucks. I'm sorry.
We'll figure it out.
But this one is girthy. Not an altogether pleasant taste on the cap, I must say.
No, but it's not as bad as some of the cigars we've had recently.
That's true. I am pairing this with a Brewery 56 small batch, and this is the Zero Cool Cold IPA or something. So nice. It was one of those things in a 4-pack that looked fancy, and here we are.
Well, we are recording extra early, and I just got off of work, and I figured it'd be a fun time to have a cup of coffee with a cigar, since we're doing it early enough to calm down for sleep tonight. So I made a fresh pot of coffee.
Very nice.
When I smoked cigars in lounges,
What's that?
Oh, when I smoked cigars in lounges, I drank a lot of coffee with my cigars. So it's been a while, so I'm looking forward to the experience. What were you saying, Nate?
Oh, I was saying this one sure puts off a lot of smoke.
It does. A thick smoke, too.
Yeah.
Very thick. And it does have a milder taste, which is an interesting change.
Yeah, it's a shade which kind of looks, it's got the lighter wrapper, but it's not a full Connecticut or anything like that. I don't know much about it.
Nah, me neither. I have liked all of the Knuckle Busters so far, if I remember. But
yes, as far as I know, I did too.
So, what are we talking about today?
Well, Mike, I want to right a wrong. I want to correct some things. I'm angry about it. Little bit. Not angry. It's one of those things where there's a whole lot of people that believe a lot of things about this, most of which are not true. Does that narrow it down for you, Mike?
Very specific.
Yes. So Mike already knows what we're talking about. I want to talk about Christopher Columbus. And I know Columbus Day is long since passed, but I want to talk about Christopher Columbus and how he got his tether and his hook into North American culture, North American mythos, let's say, and North American history, because as we're going to find out, he didn't really do a lot of the things that a lot of Americans think he did.
Okay. I'm excited. I've heard a lot of things about Christopher Columbus, both good and bad. So.
Well, I'm not here to tell you he's a good guy. That's not what I'm telling you. But so this kind of got kicked off at, I was on a work meeting, and somehow Christopher Columbus came up, and somebody said, well, that's why he never left America. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm pretty sure he died back in Europe. And so that kind of launched me into, well, let's see what I did here. How crazy. Well, Nate got 13 pages of notes crazy on this one. So
Amateur.
Yeah, not the most notes we've ever done, but I figured we'd, share regaling stories and other things.
Absolutely.
All right. So Columbus is often called the discoverer of America. You've probably heard that, Mike?
I have.
Which is incredibly misleading. His voyages reshaped global history, but not in the way that a lot of people think. And so we're going to talk about who he really was, why he sailed, what he actually found, and what people still get wrong. That all sound good with you?
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to talk about his early life and formation, which is about 1451 to the 1470s.
It's a tumultuous time in Spain, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, well.
And I know he's an Italian, so I can't imagine that he's any better off there.
This one and the next topic that I have are both going to be in a sort of similar time frame. They're only about 100 years apart, so we'll see. I figured start with Christopher Columbus, and then we'll move into the one that's 100 years after. But He was born in the Republic of Genoa, which is a major maritime hub in the Mediterranean. He likely worked in his father's wool trade shop or business. I don't know what they called them back then. Trade hut, I don't know, as a youth, but he kind of gravitated towards the sea and seafaring pretty early. By his early 20s, at least, he was sailing on merchant vessels across the Mediterranean and the Atlantic coast of Europe. And in 1476, he survived a shipwreck off the coast of Portugal, after which he settled in Lisbon, which was a key center of navigation and exploration.
I did not know any of that.
Yeah. Columbus was not formally university trained, but he was a self-educated navigator, which I feel like at the time, and maybe even today, because there was that incident, I think, in Australia with a female ship captain.
Oh, I remember.
Hit the curb with her boat or something and thought it was okay. But I'm just kidding. There was more details than that. But back in like the 1400s, you probably didn't want somebody who's never been out to sea teaching you how to go to sea. So you probably wanted the self-educated one. Because if they're self-educated and still standing in front of you, that means they likely survive and the ship survives. Classic example of you want the experience, not the book learning, I guess. He did study classical geography, especially Ptolemy, and that's Ptolemy. Not 100% sure how it's pronounced, but probably a lot like pterodactyl. And what's that?
Ptolemy.
Okay. Mike knows. I'm trying to get better at getting pronunciations in here so I don't sound completely ridiculous. But he also studied medieval travel accounts similar to Marco Polo and others. He was influenced by the incorrect idea that Asia extended much further east than it does, and he combined this with an underestimate of the Earth's circumference, leading him to believe Asia was reachable quickly by sailing west. So it wasn't that he thought the Earth was flat and he proved everybody that it was round. It was known to be round. But in this instance, Christopher Columbus thought it was not as round, or, right, like he thought it was a smaller ball than it is.
Yes. Wasn't that myth created by Washington Irving? Not in the research. Never mind. Not about Christopher Columbus.
Yes. Well, it might not be here. We have a section at the end about all of the stuff that people believe now and why.
Got it. Perfect.
But we have to get through the beginning and the middle before we can get to the end, Mike. All right. Life in Portugal. He married into a family connected to Atlantic navigation. His wife's father was a navigator, so his father-in-law was a navigator. And that's still how things work nowadays, is if you want to do something, it's a lot easier to, marry one of the daughters of the person that's in charge of that thing. Through that, he gained exposure to Portuguese exploration of West Africa and Atlantic island navigation, Madeira, and Azores. Azores? One of them.
Was that Azores?
Azores. That's not as easy to say as Bahamas, which is weird because Azores is shorter than Bahamas, but we're also closer to the Bahamas here than we are to Madeira or Azores. So what are you going to do?
Oh, yeah.
It's not an island that comes across our ears or news feeds frequently. Yeah, so Christopher Columbus proposed his westward voyage to the Portuguese crown, but that was rejected due to flawed calculations. All right, so where did he go to get backing to go and sail across? Because in this era, you don't really own the ship. I don't think anyone really owned the ship, maybe pirates, but the ships were all owned by the crown or the royalty and or other people. And they would usually kind of hire, captains or pilots, right, of these ships to go on these expeditions. But you had to have tremendous amount of wealth to back these expeditions up, because it's not just, hey, let's hop in the car and drive from Minnesota to Florida. We can fuck around in the Everglades. This is, they have to provision. It takes, 2-3 months, depending on which way you're going across the Atlantic. So then you have to hire all the people to run everything on the ship, the sails and the cooking and cleaning and everything that needs to be done. If you're expecting combat, you have to have gunpowder and cannonballs and all that stuff. It's not just a simple, let's find a boat and go. So he lobbied for years and secured some Spanish backing from Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile. There's an agreement, Capitulations of Santa Fe in 1492, the titles of Admiral of the Ocean Sea and Governorship of Discovered Lands and a share of profits is what he got for himself, which sounds fantastic, right?
Yeah, not a bad deal.
Not at all. Now, did you know that he had 4 voyages, Mike?
I did not. I knew that he made more than one.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about his 4 voyages And then we'll get into more of the geopolitical reasons for the voyages. This is kind of our easing into the subject matter and topic and some of the background so that we understand what's going on. So his first voyage was from 1492 to 1493. And you probably remember 1492, he sailed the ocean blue, yada yada, from school. And he went with the ships, the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria. He made landfall in the Bahamas, likely San Salvador, and he explored Cuba and Hispaniola. He established La Navidad, the first Spanish settlement, which failed shortly thereafter. That was his first voyage, and that's the one that we still talk about. It doesn't sound like it was very profitable, though. His second voyage, 1493 to 1496, so this was a 3-year voyage. It was a much larger expedition. There were 17 ships and over 1,000 men. The purpose of this one was colonization, not just exploration. And they founded La Isabela, which was the first lasting Spanish colony in the Americas. And that was likely named after Isabella I of Castile, one of his major backers. And this was the beginning of forced labor systems and conflict with indigenous populations, which I believe is one of the only things we hear about Christopher Columbus these days. Well, that, and he founded America and all sorts of other things.
Oh, yeah. He's like an Italian stallion, too. I've heard a lot of that.
He fought Apollo Creed in Rocky 1 and 2, I think.
Right after he exterminated all of the inhabitants of Hispaniola through slavery.
Yes, indeed. The third voyage was 1498 to 1500. He reached Trinidad and the northern coast of South America. This was his first time encountering mainland South America. He began, it took him 3 trips. He began to suspect something different, but he still framed it as Asia. So he was in the Bahamas and thought it was Asia. He was in, La Isabela, thought it was Asia. And now he's in Trinidad. And he's like, wait a second, this doesn't quite look like Asia, but it's still Asia. He was actually arrested and returned to Spain in chains due to complaints about his governance.
I did hear that, or I knew that. He was not well liked by.
No, this guy's an asshole. Like, I'm not here to say, let's say he's a great guy. This is, I want to get through the history and then why we believe the things we believe here, at least in America, and why, why would the United States have a Columbus Day? It doesn't make any fucking sense. But anyway, we'll get to that a little bit later. So his fourth voyage was from 1502 to 1504. Guess he got out of jail. He explored Central America, around Honduras and Panama, and was searching for a strait to Asia. His ships got damaged, and he was stranded in Jamaica for a year. Death and misunderstanding, he died in 1506, so 2 years after his fourth voyage. He was still convinced he had reached Asia, and he never understood the full significance of what he had encountered. So he didn't really know that he discovered a whole other continent, or, 2 other continents, right?
Right. He wants to believe that he founded Asia, so he did,
Yeah.
Or he found Asia,
Well, and it's crazy because his first voyage started in 1492, and then he died in 1506. That's what, 12 years?
Yep. Oh, 14 years. 1492.
14. Oh, yeah, 14 years. Yep, sorry. But again, like living in the 1400s, 1500s, I mean, that's not easy stuff. And then consider you're doing 4 cross-the-ocean voyages where I don't know if they understood scurvy yet at that time or not, but...
Yeah, I don't know if they did or not, but that would have been a pretty difficult ocean voyage. It was a difficult ocean voyage 300 years later.
Well, yeah. All right, so we're going to get into some of the geopolitical reasons for the voyages, so we can kind of understand why he even wanted to do this stuff. Outside of, from what we heard, he loved the sea. But here's why. So number 1, there was a global trade crisis. There was a collapse of old trade routes because for centuries, Europe relied on land and sea routes to Asia, the Silk Road, and Eastern Mediterranean trade. The routes increasingly became controlled by Islamic empires, especially the Ottoman Empire, which lasted a long time, longer than you would think. And costs rose, and the access became less reliable. So Europe really needed direct access to Asian goods because they've already gotten used to having the spices, namely pepper, cinnamon, and cloves, silk, and gold and luxury items. Number 2 is Portuguese dominance and rivalry. So Portugal's strategy was to systematically explore Africa's coastline, and their goal was to reach Asia by sailing around Africa, which, if you don't know, is incredibly difficult as well, because the Horn of Africa is a very dangerous ocean area. Have you found that true in your sailing expeditions, Mike?
Oh, absolutely. I know it's still a problem for modern ships, so... Yeah. I can't imagine what it would have been like in the age of sail.
Probably pretty sucky. A lot of wetness and fear. Do you think you're about halfway through the cigar, Mike? Should we do
I
a
would
check?
say I'm about halfway.
All right.
I like it. It's very smooth and really smoky. I like it.
Yeah, it's really smoky. I like it and it might be gone now. I'll have to try and focus a little harder. But it had kind of the cap aftertaste for a bit, which I wasn't a huge fan of. It wasn't overpowering or anything. It just wasn't super great. But
it does have a touch of like gasoline.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily unpleasant.
No, I just wanted to mention it for people that might not like it. It's not putting me off the cigar at all. It's just, it's there and you can notice it. So part of the geopolitical thing, we're talking about Portugal's strategy. They had some key milestones. They had Bartolomeu Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope in 1488. And Vasco da Gama reached India in 1498. So they had a pretty good head start, and they had a lot better data than Spain. And back in this era, data was maps and charts and things like that. So, and firsthand accounts of what you find when you land. So Portugal having a head start is, I don't know, like us beating everybody to the moon, let's say.
Man, you can do a lot in a soundstage.
What's
and
that?
A modern camera. You can do a lot in a soundstage with a modern camera.
Yeah, well, I think Kubrick was there for Christopher Columbus, too. I don't know. Kubrick is eternal, right? So Spain's position, they were newly unified after the Reconquista in 1492, and they needed some wealth, prestige, and a way to compete with Portugal, because Portugal and Spain are right there. I mean, Portugal's only bordering country is Spain. So Columbus's idea offered a high-risk, high-reward alternative route to get to Asia, because they're only looking to replace what is becoming kind of cut off and shrunk down. So they're not thinking about discovering new lands and new peoples and new things to trade for. They're kind of stuck in the, we want the pepper, the cinnamon, the cloves, the silk, all that stuff. There was some religious and ideological motivation too. So Spain had just completed centuries of conflict against Muslim states, and they had a strong desire to spread Christianity and continue expansion of Christendom, which is kind of a tale as old as Christianity is in itself, except, I don't think Jesus was going around trying to forcibly convert people to Christianity, but lo and behold, a whole bunch of Christians then went and tried to spread Christianity through violence. So what do you do?
Catholicism, specifically.
Didn't they have some crusades, Mike?
I think so. I know there was an Inquisition, and there's a lot of horror stories from the future Spanish Empire.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about the Spanish Inquisition is nobody expects it.
Yeah.
Columbus himself believed that his voyage had religious significance, and he saw wealth from Asia as funding future crusades. So he's ready to get up in there and do some crusading. Good old boy, Chris.
Joyous.
A blessing from the Lord. All right, and I'll do this for the Instagram. So go check us out on the Instagram. We put a lot of pictures up on the Instagram. We put a lot of cool things up on our Patreon as well. If you're interested in more stuff, we put free things up there for sure. We also have some paid things up there because, we don't have any major cigar sponsorships. If you're a major cigar brand or even a small one, and you want us to do one of your sticks on the show, just hit us up. We're happy to smoke almost anything. Almost anything. We're just probably going to flat out say no to, I don't know, whatever one was so bad just a couple ago, and the Cult Blood Red Moon. Yeah, the Ron Mexico. No, we're not interested. Sorry. But anybody else could definitely come. And we'd smoke whatever you got.
Sorry, Ron.
Cool label, but not a good cigar. So on the inside of the label, it has, you've earned every puff. So that's kind of cool. I like when they put things inside the label because it's like a little surprise. And I'm easily surprised. Well, not easily surprised, but it takes very little to make me happy. Whatever way, that doesn't sound weird for that. So, okay. You're awfully quiet, Mike. How's the coffee? I thought you'd be full of verve and energy or viv and vitality or whatever all those V things are.
Oh, no, it's great. I'm just letting you get through your background information best I can and watching the rain fall.
I need your laughs, though, for the editing. Like, that's kind of a key important thing.
I suppose. I'll take the mute off. I always put the mute on now because, I'm a heavy breather. I'm a mouth breather. That's not true. But
well, you have a lot of mouth noises when I edit, and so I try and get those out of there because there's some people that have kind of an aversion to hearing a lot of lip smacking, and which is hard to do.
That's why I put the mute on. Yeah, that's why I put the mute on.
Yeah, because we're smoking cigars, so you're going to eventually hear something.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. There's some political ambition and the ever popular of the era, and even today, empire building. So European monarchies were centralized power, and overseas expansion offered some new territories, tax revenue, and some strategic advantage. Columbus's voyage became part of an early imperial competition, later formalized in agreements like the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, dividing new lands between Spain and Portugal. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of this New World empire building stuff in a later episode from the late 1500s. But this was kind of, you've had these powers in Europe and they've been there for a long, long time, right? Forever. And so they're kind of running out of things to compete against in Europe. So you start sending people out and you compete over the rest of the whole world. And it's fun for them, I guess, because they don't have any other risk. They just send people out to die. And they grant them these governorships and stuff and say, anything you find, you can govern. Okay, cool. You found a desert island. It's yours now. Congratulations. There's nothing there.
Find gold. Kill the local residents. Convert them to Christianity.
We got some more exploration, contacts, and some similar voyages. Because we talked a little bit about how Portugal was ahead, but we've got the Age of Exploration framework, which was between the 15th and 17th centuries. It was largely driven by trade, technology, caravel ships, and improved navigation, and state sponsorships. So Columbus was one figure in a much larger movement. He wasn't an isolated pioneer. And a lot of people like to say Christopher Columbus did all these things. He was just one piece of the puzzle here. The Portuguese Exploration Network, they had created a step-by-step exploration system. So they did what McDonald's did for hamburgers, but they did it for exploration. They established trading posts along Africa, along the coast of Africa, and they developed a knowledge of ocean currents, which they called Volta do Mar, and wind patterns. And this gave them a major advantage over Columbus's more speculative approach. And we talked about Portugal was ahead in technology or information. And this is what that means is they were tracking the ocean currents and wind patterns. They had trading posts that were established so they could resupply. They could presumably, get things they needed or send word to where they needed to send word to, right?
Right. Understanding basic weather and current patterns was cutting-edge technology in 1490.
Yeah. I mean, we still struggle with it today, but...
Yeah, look at predictive models. They fail a lot.
But one thing that never fails is purging the heretics. That always works.
If you ever got them all.
No further comment. So other key explorers of the era, John Cabot. I'm going to assume it's pronounced Cabot, but it could be Cabot. I don't know. C-A-B-O-T. Pronounce how you like. No judgment here. 1497, he was sponsored by England. He reached parts of North America, likely Newfoundland. I don't know, however you want to pronounce that too. Fuck it. Give a shit. I'm not Canadian. One of the earliest post-Columbus European arrivals to mainland North America. We had Amerigo Vespucci. He explored South America. He was among the first to argue that these lands were a new world, not Asia. And the name America comes from him because his name is Amerigo.
I've heard that is a disputed fact, just for the listener to...
Well, it could be a disputed fact. This is a crazy era because even my next episode topic, which is 100 years after this, there's not a lot of documentation. There's a lot of stuff that's left up to the interpretation or kind of what is most likely to have happened. And so we're in 1400s, 1500s, like this is, you would think we'd have a lot of good data because they did write things and they did put things down, but we really don't have a lot of good data on this stuff. So yes, it's disputed. Most of this stuff could be disputed, I suppose. A lot of the, what do you call it? The primary sources, right? Like the sources made by the people that are actually there. These people are sailing across the ocean. So a lot of this stuff got moldy or wet or damaged, or they would have shipwrecks and they would survive, but their charts and their journals and things would go overboard and be unrecoverable. So a lot of this stuff happens to be kind of educated speculation. Is that how you'd phrase it, Mike?
I would phrase it that way. And there's an additional layer to that because it went to the priest class who were educated and who were copying all of this down by hand. So anything they wanted to scrub or add, or they could just insert it at that time.
Highly edited, perhaps.
Oh, yes.
We don't do that anymore, though. Thank goodness.
No, the censor's the good guy now.
Yep. All right. Pedro Alvarez Cabral, 1500. He reached Brazil while sailing to India. Claimed it for Portugal. Might be why Brazil speaks Portuguese and most of the rest of South America speaks Spanish. There's some key differences between Columbus and the others. So Columbus believed that he had reached Asia. He was focused on the Caribbean islands, and he was driven by miscalculation. Others, like Vespucci, recognized a new continent, and they shifted the European understanding of global geography. I mean, I can't imagine. Let's just take me, or you, Mike, and put us in a boat and send us somewhere. Would we be able to tell we were on a different continent? I don't know about immediately.
I mean, it really depends on how much you know about China or Asia. We know a lot more than they would have by so much, it's impossible to even tell.
Yeah. That is true. But there's a lot of places. I mean, if we stayed on our, was it latitude or longitude? Whichever one, right? The one that runs east to west. A lot of that is very similar temperately, right? So it'd be difficult kind of to tell. I mean,
landing specifically, where I live, it's pretty much all boreal forest north of my latitude. So the boreal forest is around the entire globe.
Yep.
I'm guessing that you can't tell anywhere in that band, you're going to be in pretty similar geography.
Yep. I guess we have had more exposure, especially in the age of internet, to different accents and different languages, especially if you watch foreign films or any of that sort of thing, where if somebody was speaking Russian to me, I would probably be able to tell it was Russian, but I don't know that I'd be able to tell that I was in Ukraine versus Russia, if that makes sense.
It does, because if it was Latvia or any of the countries with Slavic dialect, how am I supposed to know?
Yeah, but we'd have kind of an idea, maybe. So
it doesn't sound like Chinese.
No. I know when I'm in Germany because everyone sounds angry, but there's a lot of beer and a lot of beer ladies, so whatever. But I think it's funny that we're talking about Christopher Columbus, and he died thinking he was in Asia. And these other people, some before him, some after him, were like, no, this is very clearly a new continent, and everybody only remembers Christopher Columbus's name. Here, I'm speaking about America.
He's very famous here. He's the most famous Italian, other than Joe Rogan.
Yes. All right, so earlier voyages, these are pre-Columbus contacts, and I think we're going to talk about one of these at some point. I have a whole book, and I went to a lecture on this. Maybe not necessarily this person, but there's been some other things, especially Minnesota-related, and we might talk about this. There's some Norse exploration. Leif Erikson, around 1000 CE, he reached Newfoundland, Lands, Aux, Meadows. The settlement did not last. Columbus was different. Norse contact was temporary and isolated. And Columbus triggered continuous large-scale contact between Europe and the Americas. Columbus's voyage stuck because it was backed by a rising global power, which was Spain. It was followed immediately, or as immediately as one could follow something in his time frame, by colonization and additional voyages. And it created permanent economic and political links. It's the continuity, not the first contact, that makes his voyages historically pivotal. Columbus actually found, so what he actually found was the Caribbean. Don't know why there's so many pronunciations for things. But he did not find mainland North America. He did not find it. He visited the Bahamas, Cuba, Hispaniola, and Jamaica. He later reached northern South America and Central America, and he believed that these lands are part of Asia until his death. Mike, I don't know how you could see a Jamaican and think you were in Asia.
Well, the Jamaicans we think of weren't there yet.
Sure.
All the Jamaicans that were there were exterminated.
I suppose they'd be a lot more like the Hawaiians, the Pacific Islanders?
We don't really know. They appear to be similar to Central and South American tribes.
Okay.
From the records.
Sure. You ready for the misconceptions, Mike?
Oh, I'm ready.
This is where Mike comes off mute. The first one is people believe that Columbus discovered America. So there's a problem of simplification, which I'm sure, Mike, you're aware of, being interested in history. But history education, especially in the United States, has long prioritized clean, memorable narratives over nuance. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. It's easy to teach, test, and remember. The reality being multiple continents, existing civilizations, and prior contact, it's harder to condense into a catchy nursery rhyme. In the 18th and 19th... Oh, what's that, Mike?
Go ahead. Never mind.
So national identity building in the 18th and 19th centuries, the United States was looking for foundational origin stories. Columbus became a symbolic starting point for European America, even though he never reached the mainland United States. He never stepped foot in North America. The name Columbia, used poetically for America, reinforced this association. We even, like Washington, D.C. is the District of Columbia. And there's cultural reinforcement. Columbus Day, which was established federally in 1937, helped cement the idea. And Italian-American communities who were facing discrimination embraced Columbus as a figure of pride and representation. You think us Italians are bad? Well, don't you know Columbus founded America?
Gotta throw him a bone. I
mean, they gave us spaghetti. What more could they do for us? I mean, I love noodles, so that was not a facetious comment by me. He gave me like 90% of my diet. Okay. So people also think he reached North America. So over time, because there were a lot of different historical figures, the stories of these figures merged in public memory. So Christopher Columbus was in the Caribbean and John Cabot was in North America. And textbooks often mention both without clearly distinguishing their routes. So it'd be easy to say, oh, they were both in both places or flip those around or whatever. And there's some map distortion too. So early maps labeled new lands vaguely as the Indies or the New World. And modern maps compress geography visually, making the Caribbean islands seem a lot closer to North America than they actually are. There's some educational shortcuts as well. So a lot of the curricula basically say that Columbus discovered America without clarifying whether it was North America or South America or Central America, and it doesn't clarify where he actually landed. And over time, America became shorthand for the present-day United States, but back then, everything was America. Like, America didn't mean the United States back then, but it does now. All right, people also think that he proved the Earth was round, and here we go, your bit, Mike. This misconception largely comes from the 19th century writer Washington Irving. He put out an 1828 biography of Columbus, which was dramatized.
Historical fiction. It was historical fiction.
Yes. And it was fictionalized a debate between Columbus versus medieval scholars who supposedly believed in a flat Earth. Again, this is historical fiction. This is not reality. Educated Europeans had known the Earth was spherical since ancient Greece. So Aristotle, Eratosthenes.
I would like to add in here that because I looked it up, right? Google the show. A History of the Life and Voyages of Christopher Columbus is a fictional biographical account of Christopher Columbus written by Washington Irving in 1828. It was the most popular treatment of Columbus in the English-speaking world until the publication of Admiral of the Ocean Sea in 1942, which was a real biographical account. So for nearly 120 years, the main information people had on Columbus in English was historical fiction. Okay, so
it's hilarious.
Yeah, this is the world we live in, people.
All right, so basically, ancient Greece had calculated the Earth's circumference earlier. I'm doing some of that historical condensing because I can't pronounce the name of the person who actually calculated it. It's not important. We're talking about Christopher Columbus. We can talk about this other person later if we want to. But the myth stuck because it fit a compelling narrative. It was a brave visionary versus ignorant establishment, and people have always hated the establishment, I think, for as long as people have been alive. And it reinforces a broader cultural story about progress and science overcoming superstition. It's not really about Columbus, but people like to tell stories about progress, and this one fit the bill. And like Mike said, it fit the bill for 120 years.
I mean, that means that my grandparents didn't have access to any accurate information about Columbus.
Yeah.
Right? And I was an adult before my grandparents were dead, right? So this is not that long ago.
Yeah, it's not that far out of our realm. All right, the next one is people thought that he knew that he found a new continent. So there's some retrospective thinking going on. People, today we know that the Americas are separate continents, and then they kind of project that knowledge backward onto Columbus. Like, of course, he knew. There's a naming effect. The continents were later named after Amerigo Vespucci, and Vespucci explicitly argued these lands were a new world. Columbus's own writings, he consistently described his discoveries as Asia and the Indies, and he died believing this. So this misconception comes from confusing the outcome with the intent. So just because now we know that it's a separate continent or continents, then he must have as well. People think he was universally celebrated, and that's a lot of selective memory because early accounts emphasized his success in opening new routes, and it kind of downplayed or omitted governance failures, which he was fucking dragged back to Spain for and jailed, and reports of brutality. Political utility, Spain had incentives to promote success stories. I mean, they backed him, right? They were his primary backers, and later nations adopted Columbus as a heroic figure. So it's kind of self-perpetuating myth, right? He went and did things and he was wrong, but he still did those things, and Spain spent a bunch of money to have him do those things. So they're not going to let him go out as being an asshole.
All right. It's propaganda, narrative control. It's been going on a very long time, and we're at the end product of that cycle, right? The current propaganda cycle, whatever it may be.
So there's been some historical revision because more critical views of him have emerged much later as historians examine some primary documents and colonial records. So his reputation was constructed largely by Spain and perhaps Washington Irving, and then it was later reevaluated. People also think he was first, and there's a problem of definition with this one. So first kind of depends on what you mean. First human, indigenous peoples had arrived thousands of years earlier. The first European, not really, because Leif Erikson was here in 1000 CE. And the first to establish lasting contact, well, sure, that would be Columbus then. Narrative convenience is easier to teach a single starting point than teaching a layered history, which we've talked about with some of the other things, especially with Native Americans in North America here, where our histories in school don't really tell us that layered history or why, what good things they had or what things they had that were different than Europeans that might have been a huge contribution to humanity as a whole had those been adopted rather than exterminated.
Noble savage myth.
Yes. Some documentation bias. European written records were preserved and widely circulated. And, these would be along the lines of Washington Irving's historical fiction. So the European writers, like you said, the priest class, they're not going to write, well, Christopher Columbus had a naughty night at the expense of some, native women and children or whatever else. They're going to make him look pretty dang good, especially since he's backed by Spain. Indigenous histories were oral and they were often ignored or suppressed. So Columbus is remembered as first largely because his story was recorded, preserved, and amplified.
I will add in here that I read a research paper that suggested that Christopher Columbus's crew might have introduced certain STDs into the European population.
Yeah, I heard that one of the STDs was you could only get it from like fucking a llama or something. And
yeah, syphilis.
Syphilis. And it wasn't in Europe until Christopher Columbus came back. So you tell me.
Something like that. We know that some of the accused crimes included sexual crimes. So we'll leave it there. You can use your imagination or look the research up yourself. I would also like to add that those indigenous populations who did have writings had their written records intentionally destroyed by the priests who were there as representatives of Catholicism. They believed it was devil worship and should be, removed from view.
Yes. And even despite that, we can now today know what a piece of shit Christopher Columbus truly was.
Little obvious now.
Well, yeah. But I mean, they went to great extents at the time to purge as many records of indigenous people as possible, and rose-colored glasses their own accounts, right?
Absolutely.
So, in the long term, the truth prevails. Speaking about prevailing, I have a section here on why these myths are still prevailing today. One is the education system lags behind scholarship. So textbooks change slowly. Even though they put out a new edition every year, you got to pay another $500 for. And they change like the page numbers or the indentation or something stupid. And simplifications persist for younger audiences. So if you want a broad general knowledge of humanity, then you get not a lot of nuance. But you do have to start somewhere, but I think the important thing is even a college degree is only a starting point.
A starting point to work at FedEx.
Well, yes, that. Or, refill the Culligan water thing at the AI data center. But I was talking more about even things you learned in college if you went to college, or just speaking for me, like even things I learned in college, like that's just a starting point. It's barely scratching the surface because once you actually start doing these things, like your knowledge increases tenfold or even more so fold. And you should continually be curious and continually try to learn and relearn or reevaluate what you have learned. Not to the point you get stuck in some kind of weird loop, but, I didn't know a whole lot about Christopher Columbus other than what most people were telling me about him was false, and here we are. We were learning about Christopher Columbus. All right, there's some cultural inertia. Holidays, Columbus Day, monuments, and place names reinforce the older narratives. Again, some of this stuff is like, I don't know that we go and tear down Southern Civil War general statues. Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, that's a long, big topic. And I think we may have discussed it on the show, but a little bit, a lot of the monuments were clearly there for not positive purposes. Some of them are legit, but many were put there intentionally for alternate reasons.
Yeah. Well, and some of that is kind of flattening things down to not see the nuance. So there's a lot of gray areas with history for sure.
Nuance is key. Life is complicated. It always has been.
Yep. Well, and that's why I wanted to get into some of the geopolitical reasons and what's going on in the world and why are these things happening. And then we can get around. And we're not really doing a full-on character study of Christopher Columbus, but more so like why do people have such strong feelings about him here in America when he was never here in the United States, never in North America, was kind of a proven asshole who'd been, punished for his actions. And then, we're still like, oh, we've got the District of Columbia because I guess we need some sort of national backstory outside of George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and, like the founding fathers and everything else, which we'll get into potentially partly a little bit later. Not this episode, but later in this season. And identity and politics. Columbus represents different things to different groups. He can represent kind of exploration and ambition, but also colonization and harm. We've talked before that colonization isn't inherently bad. It's what every human group has done since the beginning of time. I mean, it's not good, I guess, but it's human nature.
It's human nature for a certain class of individuals. All right. These decisions and actions were not being made by the peasantry and the farmers and the merchants necessarily, right? These are being made by the Habsburg dynasty and their agents and the Catholic Church, who were also just nobility, younger nobility, and these ruling families of Europe.
Yep. Well, I guess colonization in a militaristic or overwhelming or wiping out is bad. But a colonization that might happen between, let's say, two Native American tribes or one group of farmers that happen to be on different sides of a geopolitical border, that colonization would be more of like a merging and working together than it would be of a true, overwhelming force. But it wouldn't be any less colonization, really, I don't think.
No, because colonization has a political and element to it that, if you cross from the North Dakota to South Dakota to Minnesota border in that little zone, the people living there are all going to be pretty similar regardless of the state they're in. In the same way that if you go to the Canadian border, when you cross the magic line, it doesn't mean that the town on the other side of the river is different, right? They're pretty much the same place. So they are different. And a lot of the Native American expansion and war was very much like colonization. A lot of it undocumented, some of it documented and purposefully covered up. It was not a very nice situation, right? We don't talk about cannibalism in the Sioux Ojibwe War very often for a reason, current political reason, but it was a reality.
Yeah. Well, and when you're learning a lot of these things too, some of this stuff you learn about, but it might not be age appropriate at the time that is being presented in school as well.
Right. And curiosity is not encouraged in our culture when it is directed in certain areas. They want you to be curious about whatever mainstream nonsense is going on that's mind control.
Yeah.
They don't want you to think about other things.
That is true. All right, so the last one here on the why the myths persist is cognitive bias. So people prefer clear beginnings, hero figures, and simple stories, which I guess, right? That's modern Hollywood to a T. Clear beginnings, hero figures, and simple stories. They don't want to watch Rocky's montage of him training. They just want a badass woman to go in there and own the straight white man. Bad guy, right?
Well, the hero's journey is the hero's journey. They just don't want to put in the intellectual effort anymore to make it entertaining and memorable.
Yes. All right, so who reached the Americas before Columbus? And we talked a little bit about this, and it's not going to be terribly different, but the indigenous peoples, they lived in the Americas, this is North, Central, and South America, for thousands of years before European arrival. The Norse, the Vikings, were here. Leif Erikson, again in 1000 CE, reached Canada. And there's some possible undisputed contacts. So the Polynesian contact with South America, there's some evidence, but it's still debated. We talked about this a little bit, Mike, the Polynesian contact with South America.
We did.
So that's a potential. And then there's some West African or Chinese voyages. There's not really a strong consensus of evidence, but we talked about the one Chinese explorer that had to have probably Right.
Yeah, we did.
Seen North America.
There's also rumors. I'm not sure what's on your list. Do you have anything else on your list?
No. This is Mike's time.
Yeah, there's Mike's time. So there is a line of research that suggests that Catholic priests of Irish origin may have made the trade routes to North America via Viking exploration, or Icelandic specifically, Icelandic trade. There's some evidence that Iceland still did trade with the Native Americans in like Labrador. It just kind of fell apart because of the distance and the goods that were available.
Yeah.
So when it became cheaper to go back eastward, they pretty much fell apart.
Yeah.
And then we discussed on the show the very strong likelihood that there had to have been Russian or Slavic fishermen that made it to the coast. It's really close. You would think that at least the, whatever they call the Aleutian Islands, the islands up in Alaska, right? Like they had to have. They had to
100%.
have. 100% had to have. And they knew of the Eskimo, right? The Inuit are on both sides of that gap. So there's probably movement there as well that had to be, right? Most likely.
Yeah, most likely. Difficult to prove.
Difficult to prove given the complete lack of records of any of those movements. But those people were not educated, so they would not have written it down, and any sort of story would have been turned into mythology. So similar to the saga, but the sagas were written down.
Yep. All right, we got some impact on the legacy. So the immediate effects of Columbus, it opened the Americas, meaning largely the Caribbean, to European colonization and initiated transatlantic trade networks. Long-term consequences were the Columbian Exchange, plants, animals, and Christopher's favorite, diseases. Massive indigenous population decline due to disease and exploitation, and it was the foundation for the transatlantic slave trade. Modern reassessment, Christopher Columbus was once viewed as a heroic explorer, but he's now seen as a complex and controversial figure, probably rightfully so. He does not sound like a nice person, and we didn't even get into a lot of the stuff about how terrible he is. This is more of a fact check on people that believe Christopher Columbus did all these things in America, in the United States, was here and died here and all this stuff, and that's not true. So the closing wrap-up is that Columbus didn't discover a new world. He connected two worlds, but he died thinking this was Asia. And by this, I don't mean North America, I mean the Caribbean, Central America, and Northern South America. His voyages were driven by profit, power, and belief, and the consequences were profound. It led to exploration and empire, and ultimately, for the native populations, devastation. But again, he didn't do all the things that most modern Americans think he did. And I'm not shaming you if you're one of those people who didn't know a lot of this stuff, because in the grand scheme of humanity's history, like Christopher Columbus is, I don't even think, a full chapter in the history books these days.
No, modern history books, especially ones that people get in high school, which is many people's exposure, really glosses over some of the more horrific deeds that were done in the conquest of the New World. And then, of course, we get all this counter information from political narratives that try to tie it into modern day politics, which there may be some parallels, but different time. That's 500 years ago is a different time.
Yeah. Well, I guess suffice it to say, Mike, I'm not one of those people that is rah, pro Columbus Day. I mean, I'm pro any federal holiday I don't have to work, but I'm way more inclined to be pro Indigenous Peoples Day, even though it doesn't roll off the tongue the same way. There's no reason that America, United States, should be honoring or thinking about Christopher Columbus, really.
I think that a lot of our federal holidays are propaganda, so I enjoy this having the day off. And if the current political powers want to spin additional narratives tied to these handful of celebrations, that is their prerogative. That does not mean that I need to intake the information and believe it.
No, but you've seen the people online arguing about, we need to keep it Christopher Columbus Day, we need to keep it Columbus Day because he discovered America, blah, blah, blah. And then the people that are like, well, Christopher Columbus was an asshole and it should be Indigenous Peoples Day. And the truth is really that Christopher Columbus was never in the United States, or Mexico for that matter, or Canada, or anywhere on the North American continent. So there really shouldn't be anything named after Christopher Columbus here, in my opinion.
That is a perfectly valid opinion. I don't have an opinion about it.
Well, yeah.
I think I do. I just said it, but it's more complicated.
Yeah. I mean, we're a podcast where we speak our opinions and people listen and whatever. So I'm not saying like take a stance and go out and vote that way. I'm just saying like
Leif Erikson Day or death.
I guess kind of coming into this, you get that narrative where the people that want to call it Indigenous Persons Day or whatever are crazy, right? Depending on what news outlet you listen to. And after doing just even the bare minimum amount of digging into Christopher Columbus and finding out he was never on the North American continent whatsoever, I have no problem saying, yeah, let's call it Indigenous Peoples Day. Let's call it Flying Pancakes Through the Purple Sky Day. I don't care what we call it, but it doesn't really need to be Christopher Columbus Day. He wasn't here. It has nothing to do with us.
As long as it's still a paid holiday.
Yeah. I mean, that's the important part, which I guess kind of fits into our narrative of why Christopher Columbus persists, is because we're to the point in our society and culture where we don't even really care what the holiday is, as long as it's a holiday and we don't have to work. Like, that's the state of affairs for anybody not in the ruling class in America. So it makes it difficult to get the historical truth out of these things, right?
Oh, I agree with that.
By design.
Allegedly.
In Minecraft. So what do you think of the cigar, Mike? Are we done?
I am not quite done. It's holding on. It's to the very last little bit. And I'm just doing little mini puffs, but pretty much it's done.
Yeah. I got less than an inch left.
Yeah, it's hard for me to judge. I was thinking about this. It's hard for me to judge because I didn't get a lot of flavor off of it other than coolness, heavy smoke, a little bit of gasoline, and some light tobacco flavor. A little nutty, but nothing really strong in flavor. Not that it is unpleasant by any means.
Not unpleasant. It's not overly pleasant. I mean, the smoke is great. I love the smoke. It's not offensive. I had to slow down hardcore towards the end because it got really kind of sour and nasty. And when I slowed down, it recovered. I gave it a 2.5 because I don't know. It's just, I don't think there's enough there to kind of give it the 3. And I don't hate it by any stretch. I just, the gasoline, it's slight, and it's not overly off-putting, but there's nothing to redeem it. And it didn't really dissipate throughout. I mean, maybe a little bit. Maybe it dissipated a little bit, but it was still there enough that I could taste it throughout the whole cigar. And I don't know. I'm thinking in my head now because we've had some other shades. Like I remember I hated the underground shade. So maybe I just don't like shades.
Possibly. It doesn't fit our standard profile.
Yeah.
I also rated it 2.5 just because I think you're right. It's not good enough to be a 3. I was initially thinking 3. I did not get any bad flavor from it. I smoked it a lot more evenly, though. Very evenly. So, I don't know. It's unremarkable.
Yeah.
Unremarkable.
Yeah, I would say that. I would say the amount of smoke is exciting and great, but the Nika Rusticas also put off a lot of smoke, and they've been a lot better, I think. But I do love a good smoky cigar.
Yeah, I think this would be good for somebody who doesn't smoke a lot of cigars, but wants something that they know is going to be smoky. They want that.
Smoky and solid. I think if you like Connecticut's, you would probably like this one as kind of a foray into something a little darker than a Connecticut, but not by much.
No, not by much.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what these run. Oh, I guess I do because I may or may not have picked one up. Not a shade, though. They're even at a tobacco lounge, cigar shop. I don't know. Even at one of those places where things are higher, this was sub $9. So
yeah, I know for a fact I spent less than $5 on this. $5 or less for sure.
Yep. And I would pick this up for less than $5 for sure. This is a solid less than $5.
Oh
cigar.
Yeah. For 10, it's a reasonable $10 cigar.
Yeah, anything less than 10, I would say, you could pick up one of the Punch Knuckle Busters based on whatever flavor profile you tend to like more. This one was pretty, like Mike said, mostly just tobacco. Nothing fancy, but
nothing fancy.
Yep. All right. Well, if you have any more curiosities around Christopher Columbus, I encourage you to do some research on your own. I don't know. I mean, I suppose we could do like a full-on profile of him, but maybe later. Not this season, but hopefully we added some insight into a lot of the myths and why we still kind of talk about him in the United States of America when he was never here. Otherwise, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Be safe, have fun.